Once again, the website is momentsofclaritywithtiffany.com. Thank you so much for your support and for listening to your show, because change can only come when we stand together as one.
This is the Tan Talk Radio Network.
We are back to Moments of Clarity with Tiffany Werner. To join in the discussion, call 866-826-1340. Now, here's Tiffany Werner.
Hi, and welcome back. This is Moments of Clarity. My name is Tiffany Werner. I'm a licensed mental health counselor, and I'm your host. My guests today have experienced a very tragic beginning in life. Well, not so much beginning, but that... I got tongue-tied for a second. But that in one night, Cindy was driving with her children in the car, and just 5 minutes from home, fell asleep at the wheel, hit a ditch. And her youngest daughter, Beth, was in the front seat and had a spinal cord injury that left her as a quadriplegic at the time. And it changed their lives forever. And she published this book about it called Struggling with Serendipity, which I highly recommend. And I've just been fascinated with this story since I've ever come across Cindy, which was a couple years ago, I think. And she's come a long way. And her husband, John's, here with us. And I want to welcome back Cindy Kolbe, if I didn't already say that. So, struggling with serendipity. So where we left off, and this is the fascinating part of the whole story that this family has gone through so much and accomplished so much. But their daughter, Beth, at age 14, had a spinal cord injury. And then, and if Beth's listening, she can call in. She called in last time. Yes. 866-826-1340, Beth. I would love for you to join us. But anyway, so after that, then she moved on to high school, and let's talk about what her accomplishments are, because it's just mind-blowing.
Right. And I'd like to go back for just a second with the high school, with those steps in the persistence and learning to do things, because part of what opened up her future was swimming. And that was not on our radar at all as a possibility. But what happened, she was a volleyball player before the accident, not a swimmer, but she did rehab in the warm water pool and loved it. Freedom of movement. It was because at that time it was so hard to push a manual wheelchair on land. So...
And that's up in Ohio, right? So
right.
There's no flat land like it is in Florida. I mean, there's hills
Well, our part of Ohio was pretty flat.
Okay, well, that's
but even
good.
with flat, that was hard to move that chair at first. It was a struggle. So there was a process through high school of her first learning to float on her back, and then moving her arms underwater, just to move in the water, and she loved it. So she'd ask often to go to the YMCA just to float across the pool back and forth. Well, I'm going to fast forward, but it started happening about 2 years after her injury. She went to the wheelchair games, and that is a great event, and it's for people with disabilities of all ages, but it's also a social event and not known to be real competitive kind of event. It's just more of a fun event. So she goes, and the serendipity part starts to come in so often in our story at this point, and then it just repeats and repeats and repeats. And in this case, there was a national team coach at the wheelchair games, and his wife, who was a Paralympic swimmer. And they immediately both took an interest in Beth and said, okay, in 1 month you need to be in Seattle. We live in Ohio, and we're like, what? Go to Seattle? Long story short, we did, to a national swim meet. The coach told her, go and see the possibilities. And we went, and boy, she did. Amazing swimmers with all kinds of different physical abilities. And it's different from Special Olympics. Special Olympics is a competitive venue for people with cognitive disabilities. Paralympics focuses on people with physical disabilities. So that began kind of an odyssey of sorts with swimming. And she was determined to learn to swim all the strokes, and there was a long process of doing just that. And nobody knew if she even could swim forward on her stomach. You know, you can imagine it. Your legs
move your arms,
right? But your legs are dragging.
Right.
You know, you're pulling your body. So you have
she
to
can't kick her legs, right?
No, the legs don't move at all. So they're dragging, and also she can't cup the water with her hands. You know, like swimmers do to pull the water. So that's been an amazing part of her story. So by the time she was a senior in high school, she was on the U.S. Paralympic national swim team.
Wow.
And she was on that for 5 years, traveled the world, and set records, earned medals internationally. And also just became an incredible swimmer. Her freestyle is beautiful.
She's able to do that?
Oh, to the forward freestyle.
Wow.
Yeah. That's her favorite stroke now. Another thing with that...
It's all about the ponytail.
Oh, really?
She practiced her arms that long.
Yes, strengthened her arms. That probably did help, actually. But you know, there's similar stories with the ponytail, with putting on a swim cap, you know, with so many things that... you know, took years for her to do, but she did. And the swimming took her to more places and opened the world for more opportunities. One of those was Harvard. And that we saw a billboard at that first meet in Seattle. Was so unusual. So I'm driving in my first rental car ever. We're traveling with a wheelchair for the first time ever. And Beth is in the passenger seat. We're driving from the Seattle airport to our hotel. And she goes, "Wait, Mom, look at that billboard." And I look. It's a picture of a woman in a power chair in a graduation gown. And the caption on it says, "Quadriplegia at Harvard, A+." And it was just like, oh, that's just so unusual, right? Unusual. And then a few months later, we started doing swim meets. A few months later in Indianapolis, we saw the same billboard, and again a few months later, and that planted a seed. But she never thought she would get in.
Harvard. A lot of people don't think that they're going to get in.
No. So that was...
But the same billboard keeps popping up.
That was a game changer, too. Harvard. For all of us.
You ever think one of your kids are going to go to Harvard?
No. You know, she was interviewed by a regional Harvard person. You know, they interview you at a neutral site. They don't want to have any bias or anything like that. And he said something to her... that such as, you know, these interviews are usually fairly short, and we've been talking for, you know, an hour and a half, and I just want to say I'm really impressed. He said, I don't know how much weight my, you know, recommendation will make. And so we just didn't know. And Cindy and I were looking at the cost and what would we have to, how many times would we have to mortgage our house?
Right.
You know, but we just said, you know, if this is meant to be, then, you know, we'll make sure it happens.
Right.
And you know, sure enough, so she was accepted and
into Harvard.
Yeah.
Right.
Isn't it Harvard Law?
Well, she did Harvard undergrad. She did go on to law school later. She chose Stanford, which was she loved
California.
she loved Stanford,
great weather.
Yeah, but you know, it really was another life changer and a serendipity kind of thing for our whole family. My youngest daughter, my oldest daughter, Maria, is a special ed teacher. She decided to move to the Boston area after she graduated from college in Ohio. And then when John retired in Ohio, John and I moved out to the East Coast to be closer to the kids. So it really was an expanding kind of experience for us.
Well, especially for me because I became a Red Sox fan.
That's true. Yes.
Which was a stretch initially. But
Right.
we did go to Fenway. That was typical, too, of Beth. The first time we went to Fenway, we didn't even know how to get to our seats, and we wheeled up and found ourselves by the home run fence in the back. And we didn't know this, but the players were there, and they were signing, autographs and having pictures taken with fans. And so she wheeled right up and, just became part of it. It was so typical of Beth, I did want to mention about the swimming. One of the best parts of that was the Paralympics at Beijing that she swam at and did very well. And Cindy was able to travel also to Beijing.
Mm-hmm.
Actually got to see a little more of the real Beijing than Beth did because they kind of kept close control of the athletes,
They only have a short time for being tourists. But,
yeah, because you have that. If it's the Olympics, that's
right,
amazing.
Right.
It's all amazing. It's just like I empathize and my heart goes out to you just thinking that close your eyes for a second behind the wheel and
Right.
then
What can happen?
You're like, oh my goodness, why? What was I doing? Or I don't know, all of those things. And then, I mean, by the grace of God, all of these wonderful things came out of it too. And it's almost as if it was meant to be. But at the time of the accident, it probably didn't seem like that
No,
then.
it didn't feel like that at all.
How have you been
Right.
through all of it?
Right. Well, I'm good now. I guess I should say first.
Because it's been how many years? How old is Beth now?
Well, almost 20 years.
So
Right. Right. So she's almost 34.
she just got married and
Yes.
a beautiful wedding last year.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Right. She's a lawyer in D.C., and she does pro bono work for disability businesses and nonprofits. So that she's really passionate about giving back, and we both are. We both, soon after the accident, started volunteering and trying to do more. The disability community is incredible. It's wonderful, and we've met so many people that we're grateful, for that.
A lot of times when tragic things happen to people, the way to recover and to find stability in mental health is to reach out and give back to the community and
Right.
do
Right.
therapy or advocacy or motivational
Exactly.
speaking, that kind of stuff.
Right. I've connected with mental health nonprofits, and one of them A2A Alliance.
Mm-hmm.
Their motto is we help ourselves by helping others, and I really believe that. For me, it's really been a journey with mental health because for so long I was in denial about depression. It's like, oh no, what does the doctor know? And and I had the old stigma attached to it, where I thought at first that it made me weak. It somehow made me ungrateful. And that was the last thing that I was. I had, 3 kids. I loved being a mom. I loved my husband. So it was really uncomfortable for me to think about that I had long-term depression. But the more I learned about it and understood it, the more I could start to accept that, yes, this is part of who I am, and that I need to manage it, and I need to take care of myself.
Right. Well, there's a lot of physical symptoms that come that people just assume that or think that depression means suicidal thoughts or sadness all the time or excessive crying, which are symptoms of it, but that's not it. I mean, a lot of it is loss of interest that we used to enjoy doing, or feeling fatigued or tired all the time, or unmotivated or pessimistic or easily irritable.
Right, and it's also so easy to feel isolated and to isolate yourself, perhaps even on purpose, to not want to deal with challenges that you have. But isolation is not the way to go.
Right.
I hid it for a long time. In fact, part of the process of the book was being honest with my family about my experiences